In the cemetery he drove past every year lies a modest grave marker. On it is his war service that influenced his greatest creation. He created something that disguised the injustices, dilemmas, and prejudices of his society inside harmless fantasy. Rod Serling is its iconic creator, guiding us through these stories. Underneath his suit is a shrapnel wound that bleeds and causes him to hobble without a brace, a constant reminder in his life of war's suffering and pain and hidden psychological scars. Like his greatest creation, he's secretly nursing a painful war wound that won't heal, and seems like it never will.
Chancellor, the late Chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete. But so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
When he went to war, he unknowingly walked past the signpost for home, experiencing horrific combat. Serling never publicly talked about his experience, but he witnessed mass casualties, buried his friends, and digged them back up to take them home again. Almost all of his writing is Rod Serling trying to outrun the war, seeing the value of human life degraded to nothing more than unmarked graves. It colours the black and white Twilight Zone and all of the episodes Rod Serling wrote. Using the typewriter to fight off nightmares, Serling was able to bottle up the trauma and apply it to his best episodes of the Twilight Zone, like a lieutenant who gets premonitions of his fallen friends dying and pieces of himself dying with them.
You play that pretty good.
One hand.
After the war, Serling had no mechanism to understand the mass death events he witnessed back to back. Like the name of the Hiroshima bomb, he had to grow up fast. He soon learned to deal with these scars with the pitter-pattering of his typewriter, like the pattering of those rifles in his new nightmares. It was the thudding carriage lever moment of the typewriter, starting a new paragraph in his greatest chapter.
All I can tell you is that we think the Twilight Zone is pretty unique. We think it'll be much talked about, and we think it'll also be enjoyed.
Rod Serling cloaked his look at a society that sent him and his friends to war, and would eventually kill the President of the United States and his brother, in sometimes silly disguises, making note of the illness of society past the censors into the realm of imagination. The show is now a timeless artifact that is kind of a special tool that addresses social dilemmas as a species on our own kind of Maple Street.
Why do we come to this place? To Hiroshima. We come to ponder a terrible force unleashed in a not-so-distant past. We come to mourn the dead, including over 100,000 Japanese men, women, and children. We may not be able to eliminate man's capacity to do evil. So nations and the alliances that we formed must possess the means to defend ourselves. We must have the courage to escape the logic of fear and pursue a world without them.
The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own, for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.
Rod Serling chose TV to reach the most possible people. The new magic lantern that he turned into a periscope that could look into the unknown. He ingeniously saw what TV was capable of. Social ills disguised as silly science fiction.
What happens when a writer like yourself writes something that he really believes in for television?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mike. What happens, you mean, in terms of...
Well, we hear a lot about censorship of the writer on TV. We've
Oh,
heard
I
a
see
good
what
deal
you
about it in your own case especially.
Well, depending, of course, on the thematic treatment you're using, if you have the temerity to try to dramatize a theme that involves any particular social controversy currently extant, then you're in deep trouble.
For instance?
A racial theme, for example. Thinking, in a strange, oblique, philosophical way, that better say something than nothing. And so a writer will shy away from writing those things which he knows he's going to have trouble with on a sponsorial or an agency level. Dealing with a half-hour show, which cannot probe like a 90, which doesn't use scripts as vehicles of social criticism. These are strictly for entertainment.
These are pot boilers.
Oh, no. I wouldn't call them pot boilers at all. No, these are very adult, I think high-quality, half-hour, extremely polished films. But because they deal in the areas of fantasy and imagination and science fiction and all of those things, there's no opportunity to cop a plea or chop an axe or anything.
Professionally, I don't think Twilight Zone will hurt me, but I must admit I don't think it'll help me.
I never said that. I'm convinced it'll help me. I have great pride in the show. In 11 or 12 years of writing, Mike, I can lay claim to at least this. I have never written beneath myself. I've never written anything that I didn't want my name attached to. I have probed deeper in some scripts, and I've been more successful in some than others. But all of them that have been on.
Well, then why do you stay in television?
I stay in television because I think it's very possible to perform a function of providing adult, meaningful, exciting, challenging drama. I think it's criminal that we're not permitted to make dramatic note of social evils as they exist, of controversial themes as they are inherent in our society. I think it's ridiculous that drama, which by its very nature should make a comment on those things that affect our daily lives, is in the position, at least in terms of television drama, of not being able to take this stand. But these are the facts of life. This is the way it exists.
And his discarded loner, the Western, a just as brilliant exploration of the trauma he faced coming home from war, about a cavalryman heading west after the Civil War, about America fighting itself.
We both had our stomachs full of war. And as a result, your husband can't walk, and I can't stop running. Men react differently, and the scars are different. The disabilities are different.
He would never eclipse the Twilight Zone with the Night Gallery and scratching the iconic ending on the Planet of the Apes. He became imprisoned by the television set.
Welcome one of America's great storytellers and president of the Liars Club, Rod Serling.
Relying on his on-screen persona, the legendary narrator, now an advert man and game show host. It has echoes of one of his Twilight Zone episodes, great writer now imprisoned by the sponsors he once fought.
Mazda proudly introduces an exceptional new engine warranty. 50,000 miles or 3 years on all new rotary engine Mazdas.
The new dimension he had opened up on the TV screen had enclosed around him. He became the last resident of the Twilight Zone, trying his hardest to rediscover that lost dimension inside the audience. An impersonating dreamer televising his nostalgia for the past.
Just jumped off the train, did he?
Shouted something about Willoughby, then ran out to the platform, and that was the last I saw him. Doctor says he must have died instantly. They're going to take him into town for an autopsy. Funeral parlor there sent the ambulance.
One of its pioneers, he came the closest to discovering the immortality that TV afforded. In creating one of TV's most endearing monuments, TV judged Rod Serling on his failures rather than his success.
Your stop is Willoughby. Willoughby! Your stop is Willoughby.
What do you mean? Willoughby? Where's Willoughby?
That's Willoughby right outside.
The answers, the missing third act, the final destination of the Twilight Zone is hidden in the concept pilot, The Time Element, that features Rod Serling's lifelong dream of stopping Pearl Harbor from happening and saving his friends from needlessly dying.
I keep having a dream. I do know it'll probably sound nuts. I know it sounds nuts to me. Anyway, there it is.
What sort of dream?
A real one. It's not 1941. It's 1958. You hear me? It's 1958.
And the dream ends there, huh?
No, it goes on. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, and we'll all stay free. You hear that? That's the song you're all going to be singing. You're all going to sing that in about a week.
Reliving his nightmares of Pearl Harbor, the beginning of the war.
Standing by the doors, planes coming in low, bombs dropping, strafing. That's just where I wake up.
It's realistic and very frightening.
It's real. It's not a dream, it's real. I'm going back in time.
In his attempts to reopen the Twilight Dimension, it's only a painful reminder, like the Night Gallery, that his best years were behind him. His true feelings for the Night Gallery are shown in his autobiographical episode he wrote himself.
Oh, I tended bar once, just down the street from here, a couple of doors. Andy's place.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an exhibit of the eerie and the oddball. Our first offering this evening, faces. Paint, pigment, and desperation. The quiet desperation of men over 40 who keep hearing footsteps behind them and are torn between a fear and a compulsion to look over their shoulders. The painting is called They're Tearing Down Tim Riley's Bar.
On this day, 25 years ago, having conquered Europe for General Eisenhower and President Truman, I doffed my khakis and enlisted in the cause of Pritkin's plastic products. You beautiful, serene, carefree, pre-Pearl Harbor long summer night. We shall not look upon your likes again.
I judge a man by his current record, not last season's batting average.
You mean, what have I done for you lately, huh?
Precisely.
Different has been happening to me. I keep getting beckoned to by ghosts. Every now and then it's 1945. How do you like them apples?
From the opening monologue to the episode itself, it's about Serling, who had no creative dominion over the Night Gallery like he did the Twilight Zone. A dried-up writer reliving the past, unable to use his greatest weapon against his nightmares and ghosts that haunt him. The weapon? His typewriter. Like his greatest show, the third act of his life is left to the imagination as the show posed the questions and resigned to answer them. The answers lie in two of his greatest written episodes, Maple Street and Willoughby.
What do we do when our world is turned upside down? When everything we thought to be true is ripped away, and we're forced to face a new reality? Sophie Gilson has just awoken to the fact that when we put away childish things, we may be closing our eyes instead of opening them. And that perhaps our only hope is to face all reality. A multitude of truths not shrinking from that vital, arrogant, fatal, dominant X beyond imagination, but to embrace it. To open ourselves to the unknown. Not the end of the story, but a new beginning for the Twilight Zone.